This is Lima 107 to Sergeant Johnson. Zone is clear. That was the last Covey patrol.
Good work, Marshal. Sit tight and keep overwatch. Me and the boys are heading inside this alien greenhouse to see what the Coveys are so worked up about. Don't go anywhere.
Copy, Sarge. Good luck down there. Lima 107 out. Damn, I hate the rain. Oh, hi there. I see you've already arrived in the swamps. I hope you didn't wait around too long here. Trust me, I wish I could have picked a better spot for today. But the timetable has moved, unfortunately. Something is going on inside these structures that even the Covenant is freaking out about it over their comms. So while the Sergeant and his Marines are investigating down there, I'm gonna be on guard duty until the Master Chief arrives. And hopefully soon. Still, whatever's down there, I'm sure it can't be worse than being subjected to an 8-hour knockoff of Painted Black by Rolling Stones. Damn, I feel bad for those Marines.
I heard that, jackass!
Right. Anyways, welcome back everyone. Today, we're finally going to continue off from the last video where I laid out my first impressions of Halo Campaign Evolved. And since then, I've had more time to digest my impressions of the game before finally formulating my own verdict. And the short story is that Campaign Evolved actually does some things really well, all the while still fumbling in some parts. That in itself is not out of the ordinary, as I don't expect a perfect game. However, in my previous first impressions vid, I did state how the game felt a bit too safe. And now that I think about it, part of that feeling is attributed to the game sometimes feeling disjointed and incomplete. That said though, it's far from a terrible game like some make it out to be. Once again, this is not a repeat of Halo 5, and I stand by that sentiment. Overall, I mostly enjoyed the gameplay experience of Campaign Evolved. The new environments in Unreal Engine 5 are phenomenal. I love trying out the different weapon loadouts, including some new ones like the Energy Sword. And I also love how some levels were actually improved upon. As great as the original Combat Evolved is, some of the level designs were quite infamous for how much of a repetitive slog they were. Especially the library, which in Campaign Evolved has been improved significantly to make it less tedious. Even the final Warthog run feels so much more immersive and lore accurate as we experience the actual degraded state of the Split Autumn, as opposed to the original where we just had that weird open bridge in the middle of the ship, which didn't really make sense to be honest. Yes, the game is not perfect, and it has legitimate issues that deserve to be called out, but some people are acting as if this is another repeat of Halo 5, which was an extraordinary low point of the franchise. I've got my own gripes about this game, but I cannot in good faith say that Campaign Evolved is anywhere close to that level. But I guess that's what happens when you're dealing with some of the most passionate fanbases in gaming. Still doesn't compare to the Star Wars community though. All that being said, there are problems with Campaign Evolved. And today, I'd like to go much more into detail about these issues than the brief Spark Notes version from the first impressions video. And I have a lot to say, so let's get to it and buckle up. But before we proceed, one clarification. This video will only focus on the main campaign, not the prequel missions. The prequel missions frankly deserve a video of its own, therefore, they will be covered in the next part. Anyways, end of clarification. First, I think it's important that we compare Campaign Evolved to Combat Evolved Anniversary, which was technically the first remake, or rather a remaster of the original Combat Evolved. And let's just say it was not received well due to how far it strayed off. But I'm happy to say that Campaign Evolved does not repeat many of Anniversary's mistakes and improves upon them. 1. Anniversary basically recycled most of Halo Reach's assets, which really did not translate well into the game. The Covenant designs especially suffered the most, as their Reach versions were much more chunky and brutalist in their designs, which did really fit well into the depressing and militaristic atmosphere that was Halo Reach, where you witnessed the downfall of the planet against an unstoppable alien horde. Therefore, the Covenant and Reach were legit terrifying. However, that does not fit well within Combat Evolved's atmosphere, where the UNSC and the Covenant explore a mysterious world that's foreign to both of them. And in the original Combat Evolved, the Covenant have a much more sleek and slender aesthetic that really complements the mysterious atmosphere that's Alpha Halo. Therefore, on that end, Campaign Evolved's Covenant does a much better job living up to that aesthetic than Anniversary ever did. I especially love the design of the elites. The colors are spot on and the armor details are quite graceful. It's just a shame that their AI doesn't behave accordingly, but that's a different topic. Second, where Anniversary frankly fails the most at is the tone and atmosphere. In the original Combat Evolved, the lighting of the levels really determined the mood of the atmosphere, or the vibes if you're younger. In the Silent Cartographer level, it is bright as day and full of action, as the Master Chief and his Marines conduct a surprise attack akin to the D-Day landings. Inside the Forerunner structures, the environment is more dimly lit with stale polygons, giving liminal space vibes. And of course, in the swamps of 343 Guilty Spark, not only is it sparsely lit, but it's also foggy and gray, as appropriate of the absolute horror show that follows. Unfortunately, Anniversary's environment design really failed to deliver the same mood and tone of the original, because to put it simply, the levels were way too bright and the colors were too damn saturated. And no level is this more apparent than 343 Guilty Spark. As opposed to the original fog and gray, the Anniversary version is not only way too bright, no thanks to all the different light sources like the glowing plants, but way too vibrant. Almost as if it's something out of the bioluminescent jungles of Pandora in the Avatar movie. As a result, any sense of dread and horror just evaporates altogether, because it just doesn't feel that scary. In fact, quite the contrary, it looks way too relaxing and beautiful, just like Pandora's jungles. Thankfully, Campaign Evolved fixes that issue. Not only does the opening cutscene serve as an excellent hook for what's to come, the swamps are finally dark and foggy, with the seeming aftermath of a devastating battle, showing something clearly horrible went down, that even the Covenant are terrified about what they encountered. And the spirit dropship that's crashed on those trees serves as an excellent piece of environmental storytelling to it. Therefore, when you step off that pelican, it really does feel like you're about to enter a horror movie. And speaking of horror, Halo Studios absolutely nails the first encounter of the Flood. From the moment where the Chief catches the dead Marine, to the found footage cutscene, which I think is the best cutscene of the entire game. In fact, it is downright terrifying.
But I don't have time for your lip, soldier. I gave you an order.
But Sarge, listen.
What is that? Where's that coming from, Mendoza?
Everywhere. I don't...
Above you!
There! Get out!
Let him have it!
Get out! Get it out!
Hold still! Hold still! God damn it, Jenkins! Fire your weapon! Sergeant, we're surrounded.
Sweet mother.
There are too many, Sarge! Don't even think about it, Marine!
Oh, this is local!
Get back here, Marine! That's an order! Jenkins! Behind you!
Now, speaking of the cinematography, they're more of a mixed bag. Some of them, like the found footage of the Flood you just saw, absolutely nail it and even blow the original cutscene out of the water. Some of the new cutscenes like the opening battle in space are also great and really expand the scope of the conflict to show how dire it truly is. In fact, I really love how the longsword space bombers are showcased as well. Some, like the Silent Cartographer landing scene, are okay and do the job, but nothing too monumental. Some, like the light bridge activation and the Covenant ship entry, are omitted altogether, which is really disappointing. Even though they're very brief, those cutscenes are very crucial to the environmental storytelling of the Ring. And while you can see these events happen real time in gameplay, it just doesn't have the same impact. And others, like Sergeant Johnson's speech in The Pillar of Autumn, are just meh. I'm really sorry to say, but this new version of Sergeant Johnson's speech just isn't really that inspiring. Here's the Campaign Evolved version.
Man, we led those dumb bugs out to the middle of nowhere to keep them from getting their filthy claws on Earth. But we stumbled onto something that they're so hot for that they're scrambling over each other to get it. Well, I don't care if it's God's own anti-son of a bitch machine or a giant hula hoop. We are not gonna let them have it. What we will let them have is a belly full of lead and a pool of their own blood to drown in. Am I right, Marines?
Sir, yes, sir!
Damn right I am. Now move it out, double time.
And here is the original version.
Not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Man, we let those dumb bugs out to the middle of nowhere to keep them from getting their filthy claws on Earth. But we stumbled onto something they're so hot for that they're scrambling over each other to get it. Well, I don't care if it's God's own anti-son of a bitch machine or a giant hula hoop, we're not gonna let them have it. What we will let them have is a belly full of lead and a pool of their own blood to drown in. Am I right, Marines?
Sir, yes, sir!
Damn right I am. Now move it out! Double time!
The original version has that sense of urgency that those Marines are about to enter the fight of their lives, and Sergeant Johnson states his piece, gets straight to the point without any delay. Why? Because the Autumn is being boarded by the Covenant as he speaks. He does not have time to stall around and try to look badass in front of the camera, yet still ends up looking badass anyways. But I'm afraid the same cannot be said about this new version of the speech. Not only is it too slow, these awkward pauses between the lines just lose all built up tension. As one of my subscribers stated, the new Johnson sounds like he's talking to a 5-year-old. Therefore, it just doesn't deliver the same excitement the original version does. In fact, it's quite uninspiring, and frankly, this would be a morale killer when faced off against the Covenant. And those speeches were the legendary difficulty versions. So, yeah, not good. And just to be clear, this is not meant to disparage the new voice actor for Sergeant Johnson, who replaced the original actor, Dave Scully. Dave Scully actually retired back in 2013, which is why he didn't return for this remake. Regardless, the new voice actor, Keston John, certainly has the voice for Sergeant Johnson. However, the new lines lack the inflections of Sergeant Johnson, especially the more tense and bombastic moments like the opening speech. I think he just needs to practice a little bit more, and the writer certainly should be much more clear on the direction of those lines. Instead of being slow, awkward, and overly cautious, don't be afraid of being louder, faster, and more aggressive. Just like this.
Dear humanity, we regret being alien bastards. We regret coming to Earth. And we most definitely regret the Corps just blew up our raggedy-ass fleet. Hoorah!
This now brings us to some of the characters of the campaign, especially the voice acting, which is even more mixed. In fact, this ties to why I think the cutscenes are either a hit or miss. First, the ones I feel performed the best were the Master Chief and 343 Guilty Spark. Tim Dadabo, despite it being 25 years since he first recorded those lines in the original Combat Evolved, somehow still sounds just like 343 Guilty Spark and played the character exceptionally well. In fact, he is the one that most resembles and stays faithful to the original.
If the Flood escapes this halo, it will of course consume all viable hosts in this galaxy. Why, naturally, the Flood is simply too dangerous to release, and mass sterilization protocols may again need to be enacted. Of course, samples were kept here after the last catastrophic outbreak, for study. It seems that decision may have been an error. I would conjecture that the other species currently on the installation are responsible for releasing the Flood. They seem most persistent in their attempts to access restricted areas. We must collect the index before we can activate the installation. We are near the index chamber. Follow me.
The same can be said about the legendary Steve Downes, who despite being 76 years old is still kicking ass. And just like the original Combat Evolved, he still sounds and acts just like the Master Chief.
Do you have any idea what that bastard almost made you do?
Yes. Activate Halo's defenses and destroy the Flood, which is why we brought the index to the control center.
How dare you?
Do what? I have the index. You can just float and sputter.
Enough. The Flood is spreading. If we activate Halo's defenses, we can wipe them out.
Next, Captain Keyes, whose voice actor also changed, I think did well too. Not only does Keith Silverstein deliver the character of a charismatic ship captain, I actually enjoyed some of the altered parts of his lines, such as the very beginning when he hands the Master Chief his personal sidearm, telling him to give it to his daughter, as he believes that he's about to perish from the Covenant onslaught.
Which is where you come in, Chief.
Get Cortana off this ship. Keep her safe from the enemy. If they capture her, they'll learn everything. Force deployment, weapons research. Earth.
I understand.
If all goes well, we'll rendezvous in the object's surface. And if it doesn't, make sure my daughter gets this.
In comparison, the original cutscene is a bit more mundane.
Don't keep it loaded, son. You'll have to find ammo as you go.
But in Halo 2, where we find out that Captain Keyes actually has a daughter in the Navy, Commander Miranda Keyes, this altered cutscene really has much more of an emotional impact, especially knowing what happens at the very end of the game. But of course, now we arrive at the elephant of the room, Cortana. In fact, I'm sure this giant version of her is much bigger than an elephant. Now, when it comes to her design, I personally don't mind how she looks. Sure, it doesn't beat Halo 2 Anniversary's version of her, but I also don't think she looks nearly as bad as some make it out to be. I think the over-realism does make things look a bit uncanny, and the facial animations are a bit wonky sometimes. Still, I think her base model looks fine. In fact, this screenshot right here makes her look even more than just fine. That said, I don't want to dwell too deep into that discourse, so I'll just leave it at that. In the end, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Now, when it comes to her voice acting, this is the part where I once again feel very conflicted. I actually disagree with those who claim that the voice acting was bad, which, no, on the contrary, Jen Taylor did a phenomenal job, as she always does. However, for me, the issue is that this version of Cortana isn't the version I remember from the original Combat Evolved. In the original, Cortana was much more stern and bossy, with a dry sense of humor, almost like Dr. Halsey, who happens to exhibit those exact characteristics. And it makes sense because Cortana is supposed to be modeled after Halsey. But, in Campaign Evolved, Cortana is much more bright, chirpy, and joyous, just like Joyous from Halo Infinite, originally known as the weapon. And that would be fine if Jen Taylor was playing Joyous, but Cortana isn't Joyous. Cortana is Cortana. Therefore, it was a bit jarring to see this Cortana act a little too upbeat, even during the more serious moments like her confrontation with 343 Guilty Spark in the control room. I'm not sure what exactly the voice directors were aiming for, but Cortana's portrayal is frankly where it felt the most disconnected from the original Combat Evolved. Still, no flack on Jen Taylor. I'm sure she did the best she could with the given writing material. Also, once again, fun fact, I actually got to meet Jen Taylor and Steve Downes in Halo Outpost back in 2019, and I love both of them. And just like that, like most things in Campaign Evolved, it's all a mixed bag, with some parts being absolutely phenomenal, while others are a big miss. Once again, the biggest strength of Campaign Evolved is its visual designs, especially the environments and the Covenant, which are a major upgrade from both Combat Evolved and certainly Anniversary. And nowhere is that more apparent than the 343 Guilty Spark level, which Halo Studios absolutely nailed, and therefore should serve as a point of reference for future games. Some of the extra scenes, like the opening space combat, did great to flesh out the narrative as well, even if some people think it's a bit too MCU-like. That said, other changes were a downgrade, ranging from straight-up omissions of the light bridge activation to the new dialogue, which I felt suffered the most in the story. That said, while these issues indeed irked me, they're not complete deal breakers either, because once again, I don't expect a perfect game where there are no problems whatsoever. What a wonderful world it would be if that were the case. Rather, once again, the games sometimes feel disconnected and incomplete, almost as if some parts were a rushed job, especially the cutscenes and the writing, where the quality fluctuates the most. In fact, I can't help but feel that different people worked on different parts of the game. Even for the performance, there's indication from other people's gameplay footage that some of the levels in the Covenant AI were not completely fleshed out. Although I personally didn't have many issues, some of the things I've seen are a bit jarring. All of this really reminds me of the development hell of Halo Infinite, which was really something. And to confirm my suspicions, I actually waited until the very end to see the end credits, and lo and behold, there were a lot of contractor studios working on the game. And now it's clear why there's so much disconnect and inconsistencies in qualities. In fact, 343 Industries' over-reliance on contractor studios has been a major issue for a while now, but that's a whole different topic, which Rebs Gaming actually did a phenomenal job covering, so if you're interested, I highly recommend you check out his report. Last but not least, a personal issue I have with Campaign Evolved, which I actually don't see a lot of people talk about, is that it didn't have more additive content that truly expands the original experience beyond just new graphics, modernized gameplay, and some rehashed levels. From the original cut content that didn't make it to the final product, as well as 25 years of hindsight of all the expanded lore, I feel that Campaign Evolved did not take advantage of being a remake in the fullest sense. Therefore, it borders more on a remaster than anything. A remaster that does some things better while doing some things worse. Still better than Anniversary though, but that's a pretty low bar. Now, I know what you're thinking. What about the prequel missions? Well, as stated in the first impressions video, they were a bit underwhelming. But this video has gone long enough, and those topics will be covered in the next parts. Therefore, in the next video, we will be covering the prequel missions, where I express why I felt they were a disappointment despite having the most anticipation for it. With that said, I will see you all next time. Now, let me check on the Sarge. This is Lima 107 to Sergeant Johnson. Give me a sit rep, over. Sergeant Johnson, do you read me? Over! Mendoza, Vicente, you hear me, Marines? We got trouble. Thank you to my patrons on Patreon for supporting this channel. My $5 patrons are Kapitan Sladek, Kidsap, Chocoburb, and Dravenraven. My $2 patrons are Komida the Prep Cook Demon. If you would like to appear at the end credits of my videos, as well as have early access and exclusive content on Patreon, feel free to hop on over to patreon.com/LTELawrence and give a pledge. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching. Until next time, this is T. Lawrence of the Arcadia, signing out.